Hi guys, in this video we're going to be looking at creating the king model. Now in the other tutorials I have used reference material either from image or one of my own models, and this one will be no different. This time I'm going to use the rook model, and there's a reason for that which you will see a bit later. Okay, so that rook model I've just pasted into my scene here. Okay, I'm going to introduce you guys to a different way of working, a different tool. Rather than using the lathe NURBS, I'm going to be using the Loft. Okay. Now the Loft NURBS, which I shall just create up here, as you can see from its little icon, uses more than one or two splines. It will use as many splines as we want it to, and it will stretch a skin between each of those splines. Okay. Now I can sit and create each of the circular splines necessary in order to get the base right and then guess by marrying it up to the rook. Or I can use another tool that we have in Cinema 4D that will allow me to convert the edges of a polygonal object like this to a spline. So with my rook selected, if I just go to the edges tool, you can see that I've got a few selected already. But what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to select them one at a time and then convert them. So using the keyboard shortcuts U and then L for Lima, I will then select the loop, or L for loop, and I can select the base loop. Okay, then up under Mesh Commands, there is an edge to spline command, and that takes that edge and it converts it to a single spline. Okay, so if I just click that, you can see that it now creates a rook spline, as it were, and that spline is exactly in that position. So I'm just going to do that a few times to get the basic shape. So just straight above, because that's where the next one is I want to be. So Mesh Commands, edge to spline. And then I want to choose sort of the innermost point of that curvature there. Mesh Commands, edge to spline. Then I'm going to choose the furthest one of those. It's one of the furthest. And again, and then I'm going to choose the top where it starts to become sort of like the different shape and the base finishes. Commands and then edge to spline, and that gives me these 5 splines. Okay, so what I can now do is I can select all of those splines, just click and drag in on the mouse, and I can move them into the Loft NURBS. Now at the moment, because the rook is right on top, I just need to go to object mode and the move tool and then move it out of the way. You can see that I've got this loft made up of these individual splines that I've made from that edge, and that means that it's going to marry up to the bottom as much as I want it to. Okay, then I can use these splines to create the height that I need to for the rest of the king. So by holding down Control or Command on a Mac on one particular object and then dragging, I can do a copy, and that allows me to move that spline. If I turn the spline on, you can see that I can move that and it will give me some real-time update as to what that shape is going to be, and I can just scale that in a bit depending on sort of what shape I want my king to be working on. So I'm just going to create another one, drag and drop, move, and then using the green arrow, just go straight up. And that way I know that I'm working in sort of like the way I want. I'm going to shrink that down as well so that you get that nice steep line. Okay. And then create another one, and this time I'm not going to move it up, I'm just going to scale it out, and you can see that it gives you a little bit of curvature. And now if I move that one up, you can see that it does give you kind of organic form, as it were. You can turn that on and off depending if you want, so you can spend a little bit of time adjusting. So maybe that is not quite where I wanted it, and then I shall adjust those out. Give me back my top one. Okay, and you can sort of like do a variety of loops. If I want to sort of save myself some time, I could select more than one command drag the whole lot, and that will give me another set like that, which I can utilize. Maybe I'll shrink those down to kind of give a sense of sort of depth and realism and, you know, curvature. You can adjust everything that you want to, and you can see whether or not it's the shape that you want. And then I'm going to add the crown, as it were, to my king, moving it up that way. And all I'm doing is just moving and scaling at this point. To give you that sort of round point. Now, at the top of a king is normally a cross. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the same way that I've done here, I'm going to add that cross all the way up. And I'm going to use a spline to do it. Now, if I go to my splines up here, you can see that I have a rectangle, and if I create it, it will ping down the bottom. Obviously, it's not in the right place or the right size. So the easiest thing to do is change the plane that it's on at the moment to the X and Z, okay, so that you get that flat down. And then I'm just going to move it up. Okay, I'm going to use my different views. Okay, so I've just pressed F4, and then I'm going to press O to focus on it, and I'm going to just make sure that it marries up to the right sort of edge. Okay, it doesn't have to be exact for this. And then using the attributes, I'm just going to shrink it so that it fits into that circle space that it was before. So I might just make it 22 by 22. Okay, and you can see that that's, you know, sort of nicely there. I might just move it over to make sure it's in the middle. Okay. Now, if I put that into the loft NURBS, it gives me a nice square base. It may go a little bit doolally to start with, but the moment that I start extruding stuff up, you can see that it gives you an extrusion out. Now my next one, I'm going to just move up, sorry, create but not move up. And then if I adjust its width, you can see that it starts to create that cross for me. And I'm going to add another height. Okay, and then utilizing the shape that I want before. So if I select that one, it obviously will put it back straight inside itself. So I need to make sure that I move it up so it's the right height. And then create one final one. Move it up. And that will give you the curve, that nice sort of cross shape that we've been after. Okay. That gives the little sort of diamond and point on top. Okay. Now, the loft NURBS can give you a nice smooth surface like that, and if I select that, that's called, you know, there's a sort of organic form, and it will try and sort out the curvature for it. Or you can turn that off completely and select linear interpolation, and then that will give you a very straight line. There's no sort of curves in it whatsoever between the splines. It will literally make everything as square as you want it to, and will fit those exactly. So you may want to sort of sit and adjust and see whether or not you want those to be straighter, depending on the shape that you want your chess pieces to be. Okay, I think I'm going to leave mine off the linear interpretation and just enjoy that curvature a bit more. Okay, and there we have the king model ready to go. See you in the next one.